Back in the days when the world was split in two, between fear and shows of strength, between iron and ideology, the sky became the arena where power, security, and the illusion of peace were all fought over. And that's where it appeared. The MiG-21, a jet that became the symbol of Soviet air dominance. It didn't just fly, it stunned. The way it accelerated defied what people thought was possible. Its shape looked like an arrow shot straight from the heart of a steel empire. It launched into the sky like lightning, leaving behind only noise and emptiness. Supersonic, sleek, almost invisible. This aircraft embodied everything the Soviet Union wanted the world to see it as: powerful, fast, and untouchable. The MiG-21 was a technological breakthrough. It combined ease of production with sharp, intelligent design. It was light enough to take off from short runways, yet powerful enough to challenge the best Western aircraft. Its combat readiness, like a silent agreement between steel and speed, kept tensions in the sky higher than ever before. And it spread fast. Dozens of countries got them. It was on standby in Egypt, Syria, Iraq, China, Vietnam. Basically everywhere the Cold War chessboard was being played out. Its pilots were national heroes, and its silhouette was unmistakable, even among the clouds. It took part in air battles where victory didn't always go to the strongest, but to the one who understood their plane and their enemy better. And this was the West's biggest problem. No one really knew what the MiG-21 was capable of. All the intel came from wreckage, scattered sightings, or pure speculation. Its inner workings were hidden behind a heavy curtain. Engineers in the West could only guess how its electronics worked, how fast it could turn, or how it handled extreme pressure. There were more questions than answers, and in aviation, every unknown is a risk. For NATO, the MiG-21 wasn't just a threat, it was a mystery. People didn't fear it like a weapon. They feared it like the unknown. And the unknown is always the hardest thing to ignore. That's when a bold idea surfaced, right at the crossroads of strategic need and technological obsession. What if we could get one? Not a broken piece, not a sketch, not some blurry photos, but a real, working MiG-21. Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly how the greatest spy stories begin. The West had been uneasy for a while, and that unease only grew with every new dogfight, every fighter jet lost, every invisible defeat in the skies over Southeast Asia or the Middle East. The MiG-21 remained untouchable and mysterious. And every day they couldn't get their hands on one was another day someone in Washington clenched their jaw and stared at the threat map with fresh concern. The CIA already had its share of frustrating experiences. Attempts to intercept, scraps from downed planes, secondhand info from captured pilots, but it wasn't enough. Aerial warfare demanded precision. Intuition doesn't stop missiles. Theories don't save pilots. So when all other options ran dry, a bold idea started taking shape inside the CIA. Bring in the people who could operate at the edge. No noise, no trace. Their eyes turned to Israel. A country living in constant alert, surrounded by enemies. There was no room for error. Every victory came at a high price. Every battle was life or death. The Israeli Air Force had already gone up against MiGs in the sky, and each encounter left behind more questions than answers. For Israel, unlocking the secrets of the MiG-21 wasn't just a tactical goal, it was a matter of survival. Mossad, Israel's legendary intelligence agency, had a reputation for getting things done in the shadows. They didn't just gather intel, they created opportunities. They knew how to find cracks where others only saw concrete. That's why the CIA came to them with an idea that sounded insane, even by spy world standards. Steal a Soviet fighter jet from one of the most locked-down Arab countries out there, Iraq. The mission was unlike anything before it. It needed a flawless plan, absolute control, and deep infiltration into hostile territory. But more than that, it called for cleverness, diplomacy, and flexibility. This wasn't going to be a military strike. It had to be a carefully choreographed intelligence operation, with every move balanced on the edge. In Tel Aviv, Mossad agents quietly studied photos, intercepted signals, reviewed flight maps, memorized the Iraqi Air Force's daily routines. Every tiny detail could be the key. Meanwhile, back in Langley, the CIA worked on logistics. Where would they hide the plane? How would they extract the pilot's family? Who would handle the cover story? The mission got a name, Diamond. And it wasn't just for show. Like a diamond, it had to be rare, flawless, and dazzling in execution. At the center of it all was a risk so bold it took even the coolest analyst's breath away. Someone had to get inside a live MiG-21, take off from an Iraqi military base, and deliver it straight into the hands of the Soviets' enemies. What they needed now was a pilot, someone willing to take on a mission with zero margin for error. A pilot with the skill, the courage, and the reason to betray his own system. This was the moment when the once fantastical plan began to take real shape. Mossad launched what may have been the most delicate part of the entire operation, finding the man who could make the impossible happen. The mission had structure, it had a goal, it had a plan. But it was missing one thing, the person. Without the right pilot, it was just a fantasy on paper. To turn it into reality, Mossad had to find someone who not only knew how to fly a MiG-21, but who'd be willing to take off in it and fly into the unknown. Someone who sat in the cockpit of a Soviet-made war machine, but deep down, no longer believed in the system he swore loyalty to. A man caught between identity, culture, and fear, who might still choose freedom. It was a near impossible checklist. Access to a live combat aircraft, high-level trust within the Iraqi military experience, flying the MiG-21, and most critically, a real reason to run. For months, Mossad analysts, field agents, and recruiters poured over dozens of profiles, but they kept hitting dead ends. The pilots were either too loyal, too tightly watched, or simply had nothing in their lives worth risking everything for. Until one name stood out: Munir Redfa, Iraqi Air Force pilot, a Syrian Christian, graduate of an elite flight school, and an outsider in his own uniform. In a military dominated by Muslims, being a Christian made you second class. Redfa was a skilled pilot with outstanding results and deep technical knowledge, but his career stalled. He was allowed to fly, but never fully trusted. He was respected, but kept at arm's length. Useful, but never truly one of them. That feeling, being among your own people but never fully accepted, ran deep in him. He watched others, less capable, rise faster. He heard the whispers behind his back about his religion. He knew the looks of suspicion he got from his superiors. And at home, he had a family, a wife, children, his greatest strength, and his biggest vulnerability. Mossad studied his file like it was a code waiting to be cracked. One agent in Paris sat over coffee, listening carefully to a former classmate of Redfa's. Another, in Beirut, intercepted conversations between diplomats where his name came up. A third, in London, combed through Redfa's personal history, looking for that one small fracture, that quiet moment where a choice could be made. And the more they learned, the more it became clear. Munir Redfa wasn't just a possibility. He was the chance. He was a patriot, but a tired one. Loyal, but wounded. And most importantly, he still carried a dream, a better life for his children. That dream became the foundation of everything. But Redfa wasn't a trained agent. He wasn't a spy. He was a regular man, one who would one day have to make the hardest decision of his life. And Mossad knew they couldn't force him. They had to convince him. Because in missions like this, threats and orders don't work. Only the personal matters: pain, disappointment, love, fear, and hope. One quiet evening, somewhere beyond Iraq's borders, around a small table, the words were spoken out loud for the first time. "He's the one. He's our pilot." And from that moment on, everything, the mission, the logistics, the risk, began to orbit around a single name: Munir Redfa. At this level of intelligence work, direct offers are a trap. One wrong move, and it's all over before it begins. You couldn't just walk up to the man and ask, "Hey, want to fly a MiG over to the other side?" That would have been a death sentence, for him and the mission. So Mossad moved the way they always did: quietly, carefully, patiently. This was a multi-move chess game. No room for mistakes. First, they studied his surroundings. Who does he talk to? Who does he listen to? Who does he trust? And then they found a connection, an old acquaintance living abroad, a former officer, now in exile. And it was through him that the first gentle questions were whispered into Redfa's world. Not offers, not yet, just questions. Are you truly happy where you are? Do you feel your country values you? What kind of future do you see for your children? Redfa listened. He didn't answer, not at first, but he started thinking. And suddenly, the answers he'd spent years avoiding began to surface. His voice wasn't heard in his own Air Force. His career had stalled. His religion, his identity, kept him under a constant spotlight of suspicion. And his family, they could be at risk simply because of who he was. That's when the people from the shadows stepped in. Not with threats, but with a promise. Not with pressure, but with a choice. They offered him one thing, one chance, to leave everything behind and start over, but not alone. The turning point was a single, powerful promise. His family would be safe. Not after the escape. Not eventually. Before. That made his breath catch. He couldn't imagine how it was possible, how anyone could smuggle a family out of one of the most tightly controlled countries in the Middle East, quietly, invisibly, without risk. But Mossad already had a plan. Iraq was difficult, but not sealed off. Through trusted channels, under the guise of a civilian trip, using forged documents and help from third parties, Redfa's wife, his children, even his parents, one by one, vanished from Iraq. No noise, no trace. When Redfa was told they were safe, already living in a quiet house on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, he made his decision. Not with a signature, not with a handshake, but in his heart. Final, absolute. He was no longer just a pilot. He had become the center of one of the most daring intelligence operations in history. But the hardest part was still ahead, the flight that would decide everything. That's when the plan stopped being a theory. It took on shape, weight, breath. With each passing day, it felt more real, like the very air around it was holding its breath. August 24th, 1966. That was the date. Chosen with surgical precision. Every detail calculated to the minute. Flight schedules, air traffic rotations, wind direction, sun position, radar coverage from neighboring countries. It was a narrow window. Miss it, and it might never open again. For Redfa, a new phase had begun. The silent preparation for an act of betrayal. Though for him, it wasn't betrayal. It was a journey not away from something, but towards something greater. Freedom, dignity, a new future. Under the cover of routine training flights, he studied every detail. The aircraft, the route, down to the centimeter. He had to take off without raising suspicion, and just minutes after leaving the runway, vanish from radar. Literally. A special flight path had been designed, following rivers, mountain shadows, and terrain breaks that disrupted radio signals. He had to fly ultra-low, low enough that the landing gear might skim the tops of palm trees. This was a flight on the edge, between machine, landscape, and raw human nerve. A deviation of just a few kilometers could have taken him into Syrian or Jordanian airspace, and that would have been the end. Meanwhile, on the Israeli side, everything was ready. The fighter pilots chosen to intercept and escort him had gone through specialized training. They knew the exact moment and section of sky they needed to be in. No radio contact, only visual. Their job wasn't to attack. It was to meet him, like an old friend, and guide him to safety. At Hatzor Air Base, deep in the desert, a runway had been cleared. The guards were alert but asked no questions. Engineers ran checks. Crews prepped the hangars. They didn't know the full story, but they felt it. Something big was coming. Munir Redfa, meanwhile, lived a quiet double life. Outwardly, a calm, disciplined officer. Inside, a man preparing to end his old life with one final takeoff. Every night, he rehearsed the route in his mind, counting seconds, hearing the engines roar in his imagination, feeling the control stick vibrate, seeing the horizon of Israel just beyond the edge of the possible. But first, there was one last night. One last morning. One final look at the base that would never feel like home again. And then, it would begin. The riskiest flight of his life. A flight toward freedom. August 24th, 1966. Morning. On an Iraqi military base, everything looks normal. The daily routine is in full swing, the air shimmers with heat, and the silence feels stretched tight like a wire. A MiG-21 rolls out onto the tarmac, sleek, metallic, forged for the sky. The canopy is closed. Inside sits a pilot who cannot be stopped. Munir Redfa is at the controls. Calm, focused, steady. But deep in his eyes, something more. Not fear, but a kind of determination that only rises once in a lifetime. What he was about to do wasn't just an escape. It was a leap into the void, trusting that somehow someone's hand would be there to catch him. He got clearance for takeoff, a routine training mission, just like dozens before it. Everything looked ordinary. But every bolt and wire in that aircraft knew the truth. This wasn't just another flight. The engine roared. Jet thrust slammed against the ground. The wheels left the runway, like someone cutting the last tether to the past. And in that exact moment, the mission began. Instead of climbing as planned, Redfa dropped hard and fast to the lowest possible altitude. He flew like a blade across the landscape, over fields, power lines, terrain contours, just feet above the ground. He vanished from radar, flying where the signals couldn't reach, where no one could see. Just earth, sky, and a pilot's heart pounding in sync with the engine. Back at the base, no one even had time to react. Seconds, that's all he had. He tore across the desert, skimming rivers, threading between cloud banks like they were sheltering hands. Any moment, a mechanical glitch, a change in wind, and his name might have vanished into silence forever. But everything held. The aircraft flew like it knew the mission. On the Israeli side, they were already airborne. 2 fighter jets had taken off before he even appeared, flying blind, toward pre-planned coordinates that should intersect with Redfa's path. And then, contact. A glint on the horizon. One of the Israeli pilots would later recall, "It wasn't a plane, it was a vision. A streak of hope cutting through the sky." They moved into formation. No words, no radio, just movement. Gestures, signals, destination, Hatzor Air Base. Redfa guided the MiG out of the desert toward the hard concrete of the Israeli landing strip. Landing gear down, touchdown. 3 bumps from the tires, then silence. The MiG-21, whole, functional, flying, was now on Israeli soil. And from it stepped a man who, just minutes earlier, had been an Iraqi military officer. Now, he was the pilot who'd done the impossible. He'd delivered the legend into the hands of those who'd spent years trying to uncover its secrets. Israeli officers stood nearby. No one spoke. But their eyes said everything. The exhaustion, the awe, the quiet realization. They had just witnessed history. Munir Redfa had pulled off the unthinkable. And now, it was only the beginning. When the wheels of the MiG-21 touched down at Hatzor Air Base, the silence was deafening. Everyone understood. The plane had landed, but a new era had just taken off. A new understanding of air warfare had begun. No one rushed in. At first, they just circled it cautiously. It was like finding a treasure chest full of imperial secrets, intact, untouched, and potentially game-changing. Every bolt, every seam, every sensor had the power to shift the balance of power. For the first time ever, the West had in front of it a complete, functional Soviet MiG-21. Not wreckage, not hearsay, not spy photos or secondhand sketches. A real one. Alive. Israeli engineers and military technicians began what felt less like a technical inspection and more like a dissection of a legend. They peeled back the skin, studied the flight systems, examined the electronics. Everything was documented. Every component was analyzed. How the navigation worked, how the targeting system locked on, how the aircraft responded to maneuvers and G-forces, and most importantly, how this aircraft thought in combat. After the initial analysis, the MiG was secretly transferred to the United States. There, it was awaited like a key to a door no one had ever been able to open. It was taken to a special airbase, far from the public eye, far from cameras or questions. There, it became the centerpiece of a top-secret program designed to train U.S. pilots to face the unknown enemy. The MiG-21 was flown alongside American fighters, not as a threat, but as a lesson. So American pilots could learn to fight not against a theory, but against the real thing. What once caused panic now became predictable. When the MiG gains an advantage, where its agility turns into vulnerability and how to use its own design against it. This wasn't just technical knowledge. This was tactical fluency, built on lived experience, direct contact, and simulated dogfights with a live opponent. And soon, it paid off. In the skies over Vietnam, American pilots were no longer guessing. They knew the MiG-21. They knew how it moved, how to dodge, how to respond. Casualties dropped. Combat effectiveness increased. The balance of power in the air began to shift, all because of one plane, one flight, one man, who had the courage to cross the line. The MiG-21 was no longer a mystery. It became a chapter that had been read and rewritten. No headlines, no official statements, no confirmation. The world kept turning, unaware that on one day in August 1966, the map of power in the skies had been flipped. Operation Diamond remained deeply classified. It existed only in briefing rooms, behind armored doors, in archives stamped top secret. For years, its story passed quietly, a whispered legend for those in the know. Everyone involved understood. Silence was the strongest shield. Publicity could destroy not only diplomatic channels, but lives. But in the shadows, this operation shined like a perfectly executed chess move, where every piece played its role with precision. It became a gold standard in the training books of future agents, even if they never knew its real name. Operation Diamond is now considered one of the most successful spy missions of the Cold War. No gunfire, no leaks, no trace, but the results? Strategic, monumental, priceless. And what about Redfa? Munir, the man who changed geopolitical history in just a few minutes, began a new life. Not as a poster hero, not as a celebrated defector, but as a quiet figure, carefully protected, not from outside threats, but from his past. He was given a new home, a new identity, a new reality. He wasn't paraded around, he wasn't used for propaganda. Israel understood something important. Real value lies in silence, in safety, in quiet gratitude. They say he lived simply, without fame, without the need to retell the past. His story wasn't written in headlines. It was etched in the eyes of those who knew what he had done. And so the years passed, the world changed, the Cold War came to a close, and the MiG-21, once feared, now parked in museums and air shows, no longer seemed so intimidating. Because now the West knew everything. And that knowledge started with one man, who took off from an Iraqi airbase one day and never looked back. Operation Diamond became a moment in history when invisible people in the shadows changed the real world.